So I'm in the process of developing a new program. I decided to jump on here really quick to talk about how I develop program objectives. Now, this is just the way that I do it. There may be other ways that other people do it. And certainly, if you have a way that you do it, go ahead and drop those below in the comment section so that we can all take part in the discussion and learn from one another. My name is Jennifer Mitchell-Early. I help individuals and teams achieve organizational and personal success. So if you're interested in growing personally and professionally, and you're interested in tips, tools, and resources to do so, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so that you'll be notified every time I upload new content. So whenever I start developing a new program, it's always kind of nerve-wracking for me, even though I've been doing this for over 20 years. If you've been watching my channel for any length of time, then you know that I'm a learning and development consultant. I've been doing it for more than 25 years. And but in the beginning of the process, it's still kind of sticky for me no matter what, right? Especially when it's a program that I'm designing. So when I think about how I put together programs, and I'll be looking down here for my notes because I just want to make sure that I don't miss anything. There's a difference between learning objectives and performance objectives. And I did a video on that. If you haven't seen that, then I'll link it somewhere in here. I always laugh because I never know when I'm filming where it's going to pop up at. But I'll link it somewhere in the video or down below in the descriptions, the difference between learning objectives and performance objectives. So in a nutshell, I'll say to you that performance objective is what your participants are able to do as a result of attending your training course, workshop, program, etc. Whereas learning objectives are the things that they'll learn that lead up to the performance of the change in behavior, whatever it is, being able to utilize a new system or learn a new system, do their job, etc. So there's a difference between performance objectives and learning objectives. And when I create a program, I do both. And so I usually start off with what it is I want the participant to be able to do, your performance objective, again, at the conclusion of their time spent with me, whether that be in instructor-led training, e-learning, etc., workshop, etc. So I normally start with my bigger picture, right? I take a 50,000-foot view of the course and what I want to happen. And from that performance objective, I break out learning objectives, which again lead to that. So how I come up with those objectives is really depends on a couple of factors, which we'll talk about today. The first is my objectives can be client driven. They can be given to me by the client. For example, the client could say, hey, Jennifer, I want to do a team building event. These are some of the things that I think that I would like to cover. I'd like us to be more cohesive as a group. I'd like us to not work in silos, but to work together. I'd like for the managers to really be able to engage with their subordinates, so forth and so on. So sometimes the start of my thought process as it relates to objectives comes from the client and what their desires are. Sometimes a client can be very straightforward in the exact programming they want and how they want that to unfold and what they want their employees to be able to do as a result of that. In latter years, that has really not been my experience. When I first started out in my career, I was given assignments and those entailed, hey, this is the group. I was in banking. I can remember being in the banking training department, and my client was retail, and so they knew that they needed teller training or now customer service rep training, and they needed to be able to do transactions, cash checks, make deposits, things of that nature. So it was pretty straightforward as far as what type of training needed to happen, and those objectives kind of came from those things. So they were more straightforward. But in latter years, that's not really been the case because most of what I do is consultative. And so clients come to me and they may say to me, hey, this is what I'd like to do, like the team building example. And I'm the one who says, okay, this is what I think, based on what you're telling me, it sounds like you would want your, employees to be able to do X, Y, and Z. Communication is key to team building and performing as a team. So we'll talk about all of those components. Those would be fleshed out as learning objectives. At the end of the day, the performance objective would be that they would have a communication plan in which they would, trade off or work together on specific projects and knowing their roles and working together as a team. I'm just spitballing right now off the top of my head. So again, that's just where you start with your ideas, right? Those are things that you're kind of throwing up against the wall to see what sticks. And as I continue to work, then I'll flush out the client's desires, formalize some learning objectives and a performance objective, send it off to the client and have them approve it so that I can continue on with development. As you know, or maybe you're new to training and development, program development starts with objectives. Your program is built upon or from those objectives. The idea is that your content comes from those objectives. So for every objective, you have content and you have some type of application. Okay, so that's information for another video, but just to give you an idea, if you're new to training and development, that's where your course development begins, especially if you haven't had an opportunity to do a needs analysis, a formal or informal needs analysis. And I've done videos on that as well. And I'll link it again somewhere in here for you to go back to and take a look at that to know what a needs analysis is and the downfalls if you don't do a needs analysis, which I have unfortunately experienced in my 25-year, career. So first of all, it can be, again, the objectives can be client driven. Or in my experience, my objectives can be content driven. So they can come from, what type of program I am developing and what type of needs the participant needs to do or behaviors that they need to demonstrate or processes, things of that nature. So for example, if I'm doing a leadership development workshop or series, and then within that, there may be coaching, there may be time management, delegation, things of that nature, emotional intelligence, change management. All those things are depending on the content. If there's a specific even with the team building, like I talked about earlier, if it's a team building, then that will also drive my objectives, right? So from that content, I'll do research. I talked about research again. So if you spend any time on my channel, you can flush through. There's many videos on these things that expound on a specific topic. For our purposes today, I'm just going to kind of gloss through it to get to the point of how I develop my learning objectives and my performance objectives without getting too much in the weeds. So if it's topic or content driven, then I'll do the research again if the client hasn't given me any specifics, and I will come back to them based on an informal needs analysis I've done either with the client. A lot of times I start with the client and then I want to talk to, middle managers, subordinates, people who are actually doing the job that I'll be providing the training for, or even if I'm not delivering the training, if I'm developing the training, I want to talk to the people who the training is going to most directly impact or is most relevant to. And so I'll ask, hey, can I ask a couple questions, whether that be in person, whether that be phone calls. I've done out in the trenches, I spend time with people doing their jobs and asking them questions. Then I've done surveys. So it's a number of ways that you can get the information for your needs analysis to drive your understanding, a greater understanding beyond what the client has told you about what the needs are. Because what I've also found in 25 years of training and development and being a learning and development consultant is that the client, depending on the level of the stakeholder you're talking to, doesn't always know everything that the employee does on the level in which they want training. So they may have a good idea of what the job entails, but the actual execution, the day-to-day rigors of doing that job, the challenges, the opportunities in doing that job, that the stakeholder doesn't always know. So it's always good to talk to the person who's doing their job so that I can meet everybody's expectations and goals, right? The goals of the stakeholder sending me out and the goals of the employee who's actually doing the job, who has to implement, take the training and apply it and implement it on their jobs. So I like to get, as much information really as possible. And even beyond that, I still do research. And by research, I'm not just talking about Google. I look at, academic resources and studies and things of that nature so that I can make the training as comprehensive and as holistic as possible. It's nothing worse than taking people out of their job to spend time 8 hours or more with you, for them to go back and feel like the training was not valuable and did not help them to achieve the goal. That's one. And or for it not to translate into improved performance. So I try to cross all my T's, dot all my I's, and present holistic training. I'm not a Band-Aid developer. I will rarely, if ever, probably when I was an FTE, full-time employee, and I was mandated to do Band-Aids. I don't believe in Band-Aid training because ultimately it's not going to work. And that's a topic for another video on another day. So again, how I develop and create performance objectives and learning objectives is it either comes from the client or it's content or subject matter or topic driven. And the third way that I develop objectives is objective driven. And that is if the objective is, for example, if I'm working on systems training, that's agile development. Again, I've talked about agile development, and if you haven't seen the video, I'll link it here. But agile development is more like technical training, systems training, where it's always changing. It's iterative. So you may roll out training and then, a month or two later, there's updates to the systems, patches, fixes, or new developments, and you have to train individuals on those new developments. And so that is when I think about objective focus. So I have done training before on systems training, and again, it's been agile development. And so something will come down the pike where there's a couple things that they've done, new developments that they need the employee to know in the system about changes, or maybe they finally fleshed out some processes that were not fleshed out when they first went live with the system. And now it has been fleshed out and they need the employee to know about that. Maybe it's a new operating procedure and they need the employee to know about that. And so that training, those objective and the performance objective comes directly from whatever has been developed that's new in the system that the employee now needs to be trained on. So those are three ways, primary ways. Now they can come a lot of different ways. I've done training before where I've been contacted by another training by a training department, and they use outside trainers and they're bringing you in for a workshop, and all they know is they want to talk about X, Y, and Z. They want to talk about, professionalism, and they have no other information. And so therefore I have to go and now I have to flush out professionalism, like the key topics in professionalism. It all depends on the industry, the job, all of those things. Now I have to flush all those things out and then present it back to the client. So, basically what I'm saying to you is that objectives can be determined any number of ways. I think what's most important is, one, that they always get approved by the stakeholder or the client. Two, that you do as a developer your due diligence to the extent that you can to make sure that there are things that sometimes they don't think about because they don't know enough about what they're doing. And I'll give you a quick example. I was doing training for an organization that was using ServiceNow as a new tool. And the way that they were using ServiceNow was just as a communication like tracker. I was using it for a utility and they wanted to track the meters with it. And so when they got ServiceNow, ServiceNow is a tool that's used really as a help desk tool. It wasn't used in the manner in which they were using it, and they knew that, and they were okay with using it the way that they deemed that they would use it. ServiceNow came on site, explained everything. They matched up their processes, and the ServiceNow representative was telling them how, that would look in ServiceNow and the tools that they had within ServiceNow that would fulfill their needs. But as a trainer, training individuals on the system, I needed to know really about the system itself as we built it out. And so because it was new to me and it was new to the organization, I literally had to go online and join user groups. No one told me to do this. There was no manual that told me from which I could draw and train from. I just had been doing it long enough to know that I needed to know what the system was. I needed to know what the system did. I needed to know how other organizations use the system, which would explain more of the functionality to me. And I also needed a sandbox so that I could play in the system to make sure that as they outlined the process flow and I created training materials for it, that the system in fact did everything that they thought it would do. And it was being developed simultaneously to do as I created the training materials. So, you learn that as you go along, you kind of learn what you need in order to start connecting the dots and bringing your thoughts to fruition and putting it down on paper. And when you know enough about adult learning and development, you know what adult learners need in order to connect the dots and for the training to be relevant to them and for them to feel engaged and understand everything that's being presented to them so that you can ensure the transfer of training. I'm throwing out a lot of things to you right now, and I understand it. Again, I've talked about all these things before, and if you're new to training and development, these are things that you want to know. Transfer of training, definitely, and all the objective performance and learning objectives, that's terminology that you want to familiarize yourself with. Agile training, waterfall training, instructor-led training, all those things you want to familiarize yourself with. But for our point today, when you're creating your objectives, they don't just fall from the sky. And even when your client gives them to you, it is your job, my job, to flush them out, to ensure that they are cohesive, to ensure that they connect for the learner so that when the learner leaves, the learner understands everything that's been presented to them and can actually apply it to what they need to apply it to. That's the whole point of training, is the transfer of training, meaning that when they walk away from you, they can still do everything that they're supposed to do. And so when I craft my objectives, it's with that in mind. It's with time constraints in mind. Is this a lunchtime learning? Do I have an hour? Is this a half a day? Is it 4 hours? Is this a full day, 8 hours? Is it a multiple day training? And my objectives, once I lay those out, and once the client, accepts them, agrees to them, approves of them, then when I flush them out, I can then go back and time it to let them know, okay, I know you thought this was going to be, a 6-hour training. This is really a multiple day training, and let me tell you why. These are the objectives that we cover in day 1. These are the objectives that we cover in day 2. The lead up to our performance objectives so that our employee can do this when they walk out the door and they walk away from training. And I have had some instances where, I've gotten pushed back for the time that I've, requested, and I've had to roll with what the client wanted. And then once I rolled it out, they were like, oh, this was great, this was fabulous, but it was a little rushed, don't you think? And I was like, yeah, that's exactly why I asked for 8 hours. Now you see how it works. Sometimes our clients don't always understand what goes into training because they've always been on the receiving end of training. They've never been on the development end. And so sometimes that we also have to train our clients of what to expect with development and what to expect with training and why we're asking about what we're asking about. So trainers are always training, no matter whether it's a client or an end user. You're always educating individuals on what it is that we do and why we require what we require. So hopefully this helps you understand how I craft my objectives. And sometimes in my final thought is sometimes if I'm developing a program like I am right now, it's based on what I think is the major focus of the training and what participants should walk away and be able to do once they take it. So if I'm doing, for example, an online course that I've opened up to the public, I'm determining what the performance objective is, and from that, what the learning objectives are that lead up to that will enable them to be able to do what the performance objective says they should be able to do after completing the online course. So I do that, and that one is a little bit more, I don't know, tedious because I'm a perfectionist. So I'm always doing research, and I want to know what the big picture or what the, not the overall picture, but the nuggets, that lead up to that, and to make sure that I have covered as many bases as I can, which is probably one of my downfalls and why it takes me so long to develop on occasion, because I am very thorough. So that's how I develop learning objectives and performance objectives. Tell me in the comments below how you do it. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to share it. The like helps with the algorithm, so more people learn about the channel and can follow and get some additional information. And of course, if you leave a comment below about your feedback, then they have not only just the video, but they have the benefit of having your feedback as well. My goal is to create a community here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.